Hey guys, before diving into the episode, as we're pro-innovation in medical education, we'd like to shout out something that'll take your suturing skills to another level. Whether you want to be a surgeon, work in ED, or be a medic, you will one day face a wound that will require closing. MySuture is an all-in-one high-fidelity suture practice kit and a digital learning platform that gives you direct access to surgical advice and training. The idea is that you can learn to suture anytime, anywhere. Search it up at mysuture.com and invest in your ability to suture. Let's get back to the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In podcast. I hope you've all been keeping well. This week we have with us another amazing guest. We have with us Dr. Imran Qureshi, who is a consultant microbiologist at Croydon University Hospital. But before he did microbiology, he was a GP trainee, then a core surgical trainee, and before even doing medicine, he studied computer science. He has a massive passion for patient safety, for tech, for coding, and is also the co-founder of CodeMed. He has many accolades and achievements, which I can't list here. But it's a massive pleasure to have you on the show today, Imran. How are you?
The show. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here and to speak to both of you and to share my slightly weird journey, which hopefully will resonate with other people and give them some ideas. So yeah, hopefully that can help.
So before we hit record, we were talking about, I kept noticing your tweets and your feeds, and it wasn't like the conventional consultant tweets. It was everything outside of it and change and innovation and code. And you were recently one of the NHS clinical entrepreneurs. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of share your journey. The Scrubbed In fashion is we take it all the way to the very beginning.
Sure.
So tell us when you decided, or if there was a particular moment when you thought, when I grow up, or I want to pursue the career of medicine, or the computer science part, because I know it's a bit...
Yeah, take us through your journey from the start.
Oh, wow. That's very hard.
It's not that long ago, come on.
Well, I think I didn't ever know that I wanted to do either of those things, if I'm honest. What I always thought that I was going to do was architecture. In my immediate family, there's no medics at all. I'm actually the first medic. My father is a pharmacist, retired now, but that was my closest link to healthcare. And my father was a community pharmacist, so not quite the same thing either. So it wasn't as glamorous as people might imagine. And certainly I used to work in his pharmacy when I was younger in my holidays. I'm sure my father just wanted somebody on the cheap. That's why I was there. But yeah, I wasn't particularly inspired by that at all. And it wasn't until I did my A-levels when I started thinking, what would I want to do? And the really weird thing is actually my natural passion and inclination was never towards maths and science. I mean, I was reasonably, I was reasonably okay at it. I wasn't anything special. But my natural passion really was in languages. So I studied Latin, Greek, Italian, French at school.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and I remember when I picked my A-levels, which were maths, chemistry, biology, and French, the head of languages wrote to my parents and said, "What is your son doing these slightly weird A-levels for? Like, why isn't he doing Latin and Greek and going to Oxford to study classics?" Which actually is sort of still my dream in some ways to go and do that at some point. But my parents sort of wrote back saying it's got nothing to do with us. He made his own choices. And I really did it as a pragmatic thing, because I just thought, what am I going to do with languages? And now I feel like an idiot, because obviously I could have done anything, but you don't realize when you're 16 or 17 what you can achieve.
Yeah, that's true.
So I sort of... And I didn't really even know what I was going to do with that. So I didn't get very good A-levels, which was slightly unfortunate. It's just the way that life panned out. And I resat my year. Didn't do much better, if I'm honest with you. It was still a disaster. So then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I have a twin brother who basically, he was not quite in the similar sort of situation to me, but he decided that he wanted to do computer science, because we were both we thought of ourselves as techie, but neither of us actually were, if I'm honest. So we both decided that this meant we must study computer science. So he went to King's College to study computer science, and
Shout out Kings.
yeah, where you guys are from, and I went to Queen Mary's to study computer science. But we were in and out of those unis all the time in sort of the late 90s, early 2000s. That will tell you how old we are. So yeah, we sort of did that, and sort of halfway during my computer science career, which actually I quite liked. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and I really got into my programming and coding. What I realized was that I wanted something else from life. The other thing was the IT market, even at that time, was exceedingly saturated. Like people in like the years above me were really finding it tough to get jobs, and they were great people, like really good computer scientists. So I was like, man, I'm not necessarily feeling a career in this area, and and I really want to work with people. So then I thought, okay, let me apply for medicine. So what happened was I applied in my second year of my degree, of computer science degree. So they said, yeah, you can. They offered me a place at St George's. Queen Mary's sadly did not offer me a place, which I was rather annoyed about. But that's life, isn't it? So they said, if you get 2-1 in your degree, you can come along and study medicine, which was great. And I was actually born in St George's, so it was no bad deal. So I ended up getting a place and studied medicine at St George's, which was a different experience. Yeah, completely.
So did you finish your computer science degree and then straight into med school rather than kind of going into the profession itself?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't work for some bizarre reason, before I found out my results, I was applying to sort of various investment banks and other places which was the normal sort of done thing at the time to do that stuff like that. But I got my results, and then I just said, fine, I'm going to go and start. So
yeah. And what was medical school like for you when you went from sort of studying computer science and now you're in a completely different world and lectures and the style of learning?
I hated
and the
it.
people.
I absolutely loathed it. I was just like, man, this is like being back in A levels, because med school is such a bizarre environment. I went back to having these cliques and groups which didn't exist in computer science at all. We were like, everybody was mates with everybody, and we all got on, and it was really nice, and it was a very open sort of environment. And I went back to feeling like I'm in a small ethnic group again, and other people, other ethnicities don't talk to each other, or if you don't play a sport. I mean, it was back in that really bizarre clique mode. Yeah. And I was like, I don't like this at all. So I didn't really engage, certainly with my first 2 years. I mean, I did all my work and everything that I needed to, but I was just not, whilst I was quite social and quite active in my first degree, I really wasn't in my second degree. And it was hard. I found it difficult. And I remember turning up to my first clinical placement, and my placement partner, she's now in Australia actually, but she said to me, she goes, "Who are you?" And I was like, she goes, "I've never seen you before." And I was like, there's a good reason for that. but yeah, obviously I very diligently, and I'm not just saying this for the record, it is the truth, I very diligently attended my clinical years, because obviously you can't really go ahead without doing that. And yeah, the rest is sort of a little bit of history, and managed to, I enjoyed my clinical years, I must say. I did enjoy those, because it was very practical. It was on placement, and people could get to know you for who you were, rather than assuming they thought they knew who you were in that sense. So it was good.
Why do you think that sort of clique environment exists? So myself and Abdul, we're very pro collaboration. So we talk about students getting together to revise together, learn together, publish together, do projects together, rather than sort of, I'm not going to help you because I want to get in front of you, and that sort of environment. Yeah. It still exists to a certain extent, but you said that it didn't exist in the sort of computer science cohort. What's the difference in personality types, and why do you think it exists?
I mean, it's a good question, and I think it's because when you're applying to medicine straight out of sort of A levels and stuff, I mean, people are so focused. You're so focused on getting grades, on getting your work experience, and making sure you've done Duke of Edinburgh and all this nonsense that you have to do at the same time. That people feel that makes somebody a good medic. This type of thing, and I think you lack. And I'm not. This isn't. I'm making a very wide generalization, obviously, and I'm doing it based on my own anecdotal experience. Yeah. But I just feel that people end up lacking some sort of wider perspective of life. Which other professions don't seem to suffer from. Because I remember, when I was in my first degree, I had friends from, who were studying French, who were studying computer science, who were studying medicine, who were studying geography, history. I mean, it was such a nice melting pot. I'm not just talking about the people obviously in my department, because my department was just computer science, but it was such a varied group of people. And I remember whenever the medics used to walk in, the whole atmosphere just changed. Like, oh, the medics just walked in, that type of thing.
The medics walked in.
Yeah, it was just bizarre, because you would know them because they were a little bit stuck up and a little bit, that type of thing. And not to say that I had really, really great friends from the medical community in Queen Mary's as well. Not to say that I didn't. But it was but I think it's because there's so much pressure and focus on becoming a medic that those of us who came in the other way, so to speak, we probably didn't suffer from that as much. So yeah, I think that's probably what it is, and people are still still in A-level zone, aren't they? Especially those people who come from, and let's be honest, lots of people come from private schools where this type of mentality exists, and I went to a private school where this mentality existed. So I think people find it difficult to shake that really quickly. So absolutely. I think that's probably largely what it is. And if you study another degree, you very quickly come down to earth and say, oh, there's normal people everywhere who you know, they play video games and go out and do biking and, you know, whatever random things people of that age do now. So, you know,
no, definitely. Absolutely. It is always interesting to kind of contrast how medics are in comparison to other industries. So we kind of talked about you going from med school, kind of finding your feet and enjoying clinical years. Tell us about foundation training, where you did it. How was that?
Yeah, so foundation training, I started where I ended up becoming consultants at Croydon University Hospital.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah. I mean, I live like 5 minutes, 5 minutes from it. So it was at that time the application system was just one sheet of paper which said, tell us something about teamwork, leadership skills. What is your first choice? And I got my first choice for it. Yeah, it wasn't like it is now with all these deciles and centiles and goodness knows whatever nonsense you guys have to put up with. So it was much more straightforward. And so I got my first choice. It was my favorite year of being a junior doctor, my F1 year. I was very, very well supported by my foundation program director. Her name, and she's very prolific on Twitter, Stella Vig. You may have heard of her. She's a vascular surgeon. So Stella was my foundation program director, and she was an absolute legend, and still is. I say is still a legend, and we work very closely together now. So yeah, I really loved it, and I loved the people I worked with as well. Lots of us have kept in touch. We still do stuff together so many years on. So it was great. And I then moved to F2, which was St. Peter's in Chertsey, which actually is like my second home. I was really there for about 7 years in total. So I'll explain how that worked out. So I did F2, and F2 was great. Really had a really lovely time, really good people. And then I obviously had to make this career choice. And as I was telling you before we started sort of speaking, I wanted to do surgery. And what's really funny is that when Stella asked me when I was in F1, she goes, "Oh, Imran, what do you want to do?" I said, "Oh, I want to do surgeon." She goes, "Oh, you're not a surgeon," she said to me. She goes, "I see you as this lovely pediatrician or something like that." And I was like, "Man, I hated peds when I was in med school, so I don't know about that." So I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, we'll see." So I sort of really I did A&E, general surgery and GP for my F2 career, and I love general surgery. I absolutely loved it. And one of my trainers was the head of school for KSS, actually. Really nice guy. So he also inspired me quite a lot. So I was going to apply, and my wife sort of stuck her foot in the middle, and she goes, "Well, I'm never going to see you if you become a surgeon, so why don't you just do general practice?" And I was like, "Well, that's not really a good reason to do general practice, And I'm not one of those people who believes that people should do general practice because it's a quote unquote soft option. I think it's a very important part of the medical community. Absolutely. And I think people should do it for the right reasons, but that's a separate discussion entirely. So I ended up doing it for the wrong reasons, and I got a training job in KSS, and I was based at Frimley, and I started off in a GP practice in Farnham. Lovely people, really, really nice people. I had no complaints against the practice or the people. They were lovely, but I just didn't like it. I mean, I just felt, I felt very trapped, I think is the word. I'm not saying that I'm like the world's greatest socialite either, but I don't like being stuck to a room with four walls, and I found the culture hard. I mean, I remember, there were quite a few times that these things sort of happened, but I remember this poor woman who came in with her 4 kids to see me, and she goes, "My appointment's only for 1 kid, but actually they're all unwell. Would you mind seeing all of them? Otherwise I'll have to rebook." And this whole culture of, "No, I'm sorry, it's just 10 minutes and you have to go." Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't operate like that. So I saw all her kids, and this happened quite a few times. It's not like it happened once or twice. And that whole, and again, this isn't a slight on GPs. It's not really their fault. I mean, this comes from external pressures, but that whole mentality didn't sit well. I didn't like being so isolated. I sort of didn't like knowing a little bit about everything and not much about one thing in particular. It's not the type of person that I am. I think it suits other people really well. It didn't suit me at all. And I just felt like anything which was remotely interesting, I sort of was pawning off to somebody else who was quote unquote the specialist. And I felt incomplete, probably is the better word for it in that sense. So, and my wife sort of realized within a month and a half of me being there that I was utterly miserable. And
what were you doing? Just sulking when you came home?
I don't know. She just, I mean, we didn't have kids at that point, and I think she just thought, man, what is this dude doing? You know, he's like not engaging or anything. And I mean, I suppose it was like an hour and a half's drive, you know, or 2 hours drive every day. So maybe I was just tired. Maybe that's what it was. But she basically said, all right, fine, leave GP if you want to and do what you like, you know. And not that begrudgingly, fortunately. I was like, you're the best wife in the world, thank you. So then I managed to find a leftover job in KSS that hadn't been taken, a training job. So I applied for it and got it, and went back to St. Peter's where I did my F2. So I'd only left for like a month and a half or 2 months, and I was back. And I must say that I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Now this is where the story becomes a little bit complicated. Not that it's not already complicated. I basically, when I was an F2, we had our mandatory teaching sessions as you do, and ours were like 3 hours long. And our pharmacist at the time, short Palestinian man, his name was Hani, and one of my really, really close mates now. But he gave us a lecture about gentamicin. My whole journey really starts with an antibiotic. It's so weird. And he was basically standing there saying, oh, you doctors are terrible. You don't prescribe gentamicin properly. There's toxicity and datexes and all this sort of thing. And I was like, man, this guy's got his knickers in a twist for some reason, you know? So I was just like, okay. And actually I was genuinely appalled about, by what he was saying. You know, I'm so gutless because I remember as an F1, I hated prescribing gentamicin. I hated it, you know? Every time I had to
calculate.
Anytime I had to go anywhere near it, I was like, man, ideal body weight, corrected body weight, creatinine clearance is too much. And then when I became an F2, it was one of those jobs that I really just did delegate. I'm not good at delegating sort of nonsense to other people, but I had 4 F1s and they were prescribing gentamicin. I was not prescribing it. So what happened was, I was so appalled that I emailed Hani and I said, can we just sit down and I just want to chat with you about, you know, why this is such a problem? Because he said he was receiving 60 to 70 datexes a month about gentamicin.
Wow.
Yeah. It was nuts. You know, I was like, this is just crazy. So I sat down with him on Surgical HDU and we spent about 45 minutes. And I said, just take me through this process. Help me to understand why this is so difficult for everybody. And I remember sitting down there and I actually just drew a process map of all the steps that it took to prescribe gentamicin. I realized there were 17 steps to prescribe gentamicin with 3 very complicated mathematical equations in the middle. And I said, come on, man, this is a losing battle. I said, we're stretched at the best of times. Can you imagine that somebody has got like 20 patients to see at night and, you know, they have to prescribe gentamicin? I mean, it will take them better part of 5 minutes to do it properly. So he goes, yeah, but, you know, what else can we do? I said, well, let me have a think about it. So this is where my computer science brain sort of kicked in.
I was going to say, amazing. Mapping out 17 processes. I was like, nah.
So I was like, come on, we have to be able to simplify this. So I basically spent the next week, much to my wife's irritation, coding what was the first gentamicin or the first sort of complete gentamicin calculator. There's one I think that just pipped me, but it was a slightly shortened version of, I think it was done by Nottingham. And I basically wrote it and we trialed it and it was really successful, obviously. So, you know, it took out all the human factors and all the problems that are associated with prescribing sort of a very complicated antibiotic. And, you know, all you did was you just typed in the patient's details, you press calculate, it tells you all the rest of it, would do all the renal function.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I must say it wasn't that amazing. I feel like a bit of a fraud for milking that a little bit, but, you know, it is what it is. But, you know, it's that typical thing.
No, but it's painful.
Huh?
It's painful. Like prescribing gentamicin, amikacin, all of that jazz. It's painful as a doctor to do, so it is amazing to have just a calculator that does it.
well, you know, it's really funny because at the time my twin brother said to me, he goes, it seems pretty good what you did, yeah. And I was like, come on, man, you know as well as I do, this code is not particularly difficult, you know, like.
So I was going to say, during that time, were you still actively coding, doing like tech projects or whatnot, or did you completely, because
what was
on and off.
On and
Not
off. So you
with
still
any
were-
not with any regularity, I must say. But that was after about 2 or 3 years. That's the first time I did like a what I would say is a slightly significant project, which I hadn't done for a while. And so what happened was, people, and this is a problem with healthcare in general, when they find a specialist in a non-medical sense, and they don't understand too much about it, they'll just think it's like the world's best thing. And it sort of became the world's best thing. And I was like, and I remember saying multiple times to multiple people, it's not really that big a deal. It's really a small piece of code. It's just not quite straightforward. But people were quite taken with it, obviously, because it had really good results. It had really good outcomes. And that probably was the most important thing. So 2 other hospitals bought it from me, which I wasn't selling it. I had no intention of selling it. But the antimicrobial, so Hani basically went around told the world, that, we've got this gentamicin calculator. It's awesome.
He went into sales.
So the antibiotic sort of pharmacist from 2 other hospitals approached me and said, "Will you sell it to us?" And I was like, "Okay." They said, "How much for?" And I was like, "I don't know how much to sell it to you for." So I ended up selling it for $5,000 to each of them. So I made $10,000 in the process, which was nice. It was very, very welcome. And actually, I know that Frimley Park is still using it. Still,
Oh wow!
Yeah, still,
Amazing.
and so is St Peters. To be fair, I don't know if Basingstoke's using theirs, but they're still being used by 2 hospitals, so that's nice. It has stood the test of time. So that's basically what happened. And after that, I sort of felt like this improvement stuff is really good. And to be fair, I had done 2 improvement projects as an F1, but quality improvement didn't exist as a concept when we were junior doctors. We didn't know this term, quality improvement. So I just called them making things better, basically.
Yeah.
So I sort of was floundering a little bit, not really knowing sort of what to do. And I came across this conference, which is the International Forum on Quality and Safety in Healthcare, which is run by the BMJ, and the IHI, which is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement in the United States. Really big organization. It was run at the time by a chap called Don Berwick. You might have heard of. He wrote the Berwick report for one of our governments. So I went to this conference in Berlin. It was at the time in 2009. It was. And they basically introduced me to systems, variability, human factors, all of the stuff that you're just never taught at med school or anybody else teaches you. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people are genuinely making change. Like, whenever they see it, they're like, I felt really empowered. I felt like this is the stuff, man. This is the stuff that really resonates with me, because it's all about improvement. So I remember sitting in my hotel, the Excelsior Hotel. It was very, very plush. Excelsior Hotel. It wasn't really in Berlin. It was nice enough. And I thought, what I mean, I'd been so inspired by watching what other people were doing that I thought, what kind of change can we as junior doctors make sort of practically? And I thought, why don't we start doing our own quality improvement projects? So I coined this organization, this name, DAPS. So it's an acronym for Doctors Advancing Patient Safety. It is the worst name in the world, and I've kicked myself so many times afterwards. But it is what it is. It was called DAPS. And I went back to my hospital, so St. Peters, and I sort of had a meeting with the medical director, who's a legend, Mike Baxter, and Andrew Lyles, who's the chief exec. And I said, guys, I really want to run this quality improvement program, get the junior doctors on board and get people doing this stuff. Is it okay? And they were really supportive, really helpful. So then, I basically started a program for quality improvement, and lots of people got involved. We did quite a few projects, really good outcomes, and it really took off in a really big way, and was very, very well supported by the hospital after that. So that sort of turned into a completely different beast over the next sort of 6 or 7 years. Even though it was like a voluntary organization, we ended up running, which we still do actually. We haven't stopped doing it. It's only because of COVID we've had to stop it, but we do an annual innovation summer school. We held sort of annual conferences to get junior doctors to present quality improvement work. We've done 2 improvement trips to Pakistan to work with junior doctors there to do quality improvement. I mean, we've done loads of stuff. It's been really, really good, and off a zero budget, really with sort of other people helping and funding and stuff. So that's been a labor of love and a lot of work, which has been great. And that sort of introduced me to that whole side of quality improvement. So I became an innovation fellow with, at the time, there was something called the NHS Institute for Innovation Improvement. So I became their fellow and used to attend sort of their sessions and stuff, and really became quite sort of involved with quality improvement, patient safety. So then let me get back to where the story was. Okay, so I've sort of sort of halfway through my surgical training, and I remember that even though I loved surgery, it wasn't that I didn't like it. I loved it. I just didn't like the ethos behind it. There was something that really bothered me. I'll tell you, the very first thing that I was told when I walked into my surgical induction by I won't say the name of the person because I remember it, and I won't abuse her in public. But she basically said to me, she goes, "Imran, let me give you one piece of advice." She goes, "Surgery is all about you," and she used a profanity and everybody else. That's what she said. That was the first piece of advice. I was like, I don't really operate like that. It's not really my style, to do stuff like that. And I think it showed actually a lot, because even when I did urology as a rotation, which is actually what I ended up wanting to do, urology, my bosses used to say to me, "Imran, you're never in theatre." And I said, "Well, that's because I'm on call 1 and 2. So every other day I was on call."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Come on, man. I worked in the area where I did 28 days straight.
That's the area.
I worked 28 days straight without a break once. That was exactly. So
how can we forget? You're probably looking at us and like, oh, look at these guys.
Look at these privileged juniors.
The word lightweight just goes through my mind all the time. Just
I remember you used to hear stories like, I was so constipated. For working 3-4 days in a row, I got hemorrhoids and I had surgery. I came back into work. The crazy.
Us guys, when it's 5 o'clock, it's like no, that's it.
So all right.
Yeah, times have changed. But I was on call 1 and 2. So they would say to me, "They come to theatre." I said, "Okay, if I come to theatre, who's going to hold the on-call bleep? Who's going to go and see the pyelonephritis, the stone in A&E?" Oh, they said they can wait, and I was like, no, actually they can't. No, that really can't wait. I would much rather that I was happy that those people were all sorted. Then I'm happy to come to theatre. And I did go to theatre, but not as much as I could have. But I genuinely liked it. I loved, especially when I did vascular. I really loved vascular. Just could not become a vascular surgeon. Loved orthopedics. I should have actually thought about becoming an orthopedic surgeon, but I didn't at the time. But I really did like it. But in the end, what I found was that my whole patient safety, quality improvement life was just taking over in a massive way. It really was just blossoming into something that I'd never quite expected, because you have to remember there weren't that many people doing it in the UK at the time, and I'd set up a whole junior doctor program. It was going from strength to strength. There was so much going on. I felt like this was really the part of me that needed to move and to come into its own, and I felt like surgical training would really limit me in my potential. So what had happened was, because of the gentamicin calculator, I'd been invited onto the antibiotic subcommittee. Can you imagine a surgeon sitting on an antibiotic subcommittee? But I was there, and I got involved in audits and all sorts of things related to microbiology, and not consciously. It just sort of happened, and because Hani and I were good mates, I sort of did stuff with him, and it ended up sort of becoming something when I started thinking of it as a career, and I was like, wow, this seems fairly good. And look at the consultant, Dr. Grundy, who it was at the time, Clive Grundy, who was one of the reasons I became a microbiologist. Such a lovely man, and really good at giving advice. And I thought, I could do this all day. I can sit in the office and pick up a phone and say, give Tazocin. I can do that. So
step up, escalate.
In my naivety, I thought that's what microbiology training was going to be, and it wasn't quite. But that's another story. So I ended up essentially leaving surgical training and applying for micro with not much thought, if I'm quite honest, about what I was going to do if I got it, other than accept a job. But so I applied, and I got a job, which I just couldn't believe. Honestly, I was in a room with people who had done PhDs, masters, diplomas in microbiology, infectious diseases, and here was me, the surgical trainee with I'd only done 4 months of medicine before that as an F1.
But you had a gentamicin calculator.
That trumps.
I don't know what it was, if I'm honest, but I remember the ASCII stations, the for my reg post. I remember the stations, so I remember all 3 of them. But the one that stood out the most, because it was such a disaster. I mean, you cannot imagine what a disaster that was. It was a station on meningitis. Okay. I have never treated meningitis in my life. Okay, I'm a surgeon essentially, the whole of my life. Yeah. So they said, "What antibiotics would you give?" And I just went, benzyl penicillin. Well, exactly, because I remembered somewhere in my meager brain that GPs give benzyl penicillin as a first dose for meningitis. So I just blurted that out. And then the 3 consultants sitting there looked at me like I was like the world's biggest idiot, and said, "Would you like to give anything else?" And I was like, rifampicin? I don't know what was. I just thought this is it. This is the whole thing over. And
Yeah.
and then they said, here's a CSF. Can you interpret it? Never done an LP. Never seen a CSF. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what this is. But what happened was at the end of and this is something this is a story I tell lots of people about because I think it's important. At the end of the interview, they sent everybody else home apart from me. And there's a good 20 of us, I think, 20 or 30 of us there for the interview. Everybody was asked to go home except me. And I had the largest portfolio by far. It was something like that thick. It's massive. It obviously nothing microbiology related in it, or very little,
Yeah.
other than things like a gentamicin calculator and one audit I think I'd done. But it had lots of my quality improvement work, patient safety work, all of this stuff, which was, I imagine, fairly unique to me. And they said, we need another half an hour to go through your portfolio. So they did. I just sat there literally for half an hour while they went through my portfolio and handed it to me and said, you can go. And because of that one station, the other two stations, to be fair, were fine, but that station I just messed up so badly. I thought, nobody's going to give me a job, man. I don't even know how to treat meningitis. Come on, let's be honest. And when I got my number, I was like, oh my God, like run through number in London.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just crazy, and so I was very grateful, obviously, and I took up the post. But again, I think everybody obsesses about doing so much related to the specialty that they forget that now, especially now, we're looking for holistic people. We're not looking for the best surgeon in the world or the best microbiologist or the best cardiologist. We're looking for somebody who brings something else. I mean, I know because I sit in consultant interviews now that, what are you as a person going to add to us? There's 3 other people applying to be a surgeon here. What makes you different? And I think that's really what helped me when I was there at that time. So I think it's important, and I think people miss out on that. So yeah.
Throughout your journey, there's something that you display from going from computer science to medicine to GP training to CST to microbiology, and that's the being open to the idea of change and being open to the idea of experiencing it before moving on. Were there any barriers at any of those change points where you thought, because a lot of people do nowadays feel like, all right, if I start CST, I better see it through to the end. If I start medical training, I better see it through to the end, or I'm a chicken or whatever. I just want to talk through your sort of processes of sort of making those decisions.
Yeah, it's a good question actually. And again, this is and I'm a foundation program director, so I ended up giving lots of career advice at the moment. Whether people ask for it, I give it. And I think I always say the same thing to people. I'm like, you have to figure out what it is that you want. Not what other people want for you or what you think might be good for you. What do you actually tangibly want from life? Do you want a career? Do you want a career and a life, or do you want a life? Because those things all bring very, very different choices. And I think the one thing that I did was I was always very authentic with myself. It's not like I hadn't moved before from one degree to another and experienced something different. I felt that I needed to be able to do what I'm going to be able to deliver the best in, or that's going to, is going to show me as the most authentic part of myself. I didn't want to be trapped in something where I'd be cursing being in something whilst at the same time trying to be something else. And that's never about who I am, and it's still not about who I am. I'm always willing to change and to move if that needs, if that's the case. And I think, it's when people aren't authentic with themselves. It's when they feel that the system's going to eat them up and spit, and chew them up alive. That's where they get scared. They're like, but if I don't do this, then my pay scale is going to go down, or this is going to happen, or I can't get married at this time, or what about this, or what about that? I mean, people worry about all of these things a lot. I generally am quite pragmatic about those things. I'm like, life comes together somehow, but you need to be the best version of yourself that you can. Otherwise, how are you ever going to survive in life? If you cannot be authentic with yourself, how can you be authentic with life? And I think that's always my position. That's the reason that I've been fairly happy to switch, because I'm like, okay, this isn't working for me. And if it's not working now, it's not going to work in 10 years time. It's not going to work in 20 years time. And I'm gonna hate myself, type of thing. And it's really funny. I sort of apply this thing to life in general. And as you may realize, I'm Pakistani origin, so I come from a generation where our parents were they wanted to be very involved in who we got married to. And I remember when my mother said to me, I was 20, and she said to me, she goes, oh, there's, I'm looking for you to get married and stuff, And I was like, I sat her down. I said, Mum, let me give you some advice. Okay, I did, and I said, if you pick somebody for me and I don't end up liking that person, I'm going to blame you for the rest of my life. Yeah, I said if I pick that person and it doesn't work out, I've only got myself to blame. And she goes, that's a really good point. She goes, make your own decision. So and it's part of being authentic. I want to do that thing which is going to be the best that I'm going to offer the best in, and I've been married for I think 16 years now, and it's still working somehow. Amazing. I don't. My wife is the most patient person on the whole earth, and props to her for this whole journey. If I'm quite honest. Yeah. Because we were married when I was a medical student, so she's been on this whole roller. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. She's been on this whole roller coaster with me the whole time. So really, she's the thing that's kept me together and allowed me to do all of these things. Really, it's really props to her. So yeah. Again, this issue of being authentic, I think, is the most important thing for me, and this is the thing that I champion for other people as well. Like, one of my F1s from last year, she went through a really really difficult time, and I probably shouldn't talk about what happened to her in particular, but she is at another hospital this year, and she messaged me. She goes, Imran, can I come and talk to you? And I said, yeah, of course you can. She goes, I've got nobody here that I can talk to, so can I come and talk to you about career stuff? And she came, and she was quite upset about what was going on, and that she wasn't progressing and stuff like that. I said, come on, man. I said, look, you're only 25 or 26 or whatever it is. I said, you've got the whole of your life in front of you. I said, why are you worrying about these things now? I said, what is it that really makes you happy? And she goes, if I'm honest, cooking makes me happy. And I said, so why didn't you do something like that? Why didn't you get involved? I said, there's Rupi was one of the previous clinical entrepreneurs. I said, look at what that dude's done. I said, he's turned a passion into something which is really good for him. I said, why don't you do the same thing? So I said, come on, be authentic with yourself. Do something which is going to make you happy. And I'm not saying give up your career. I'm not saying that at all. But what stops you from really investing in your passions? And I'm trying to bring people back to their own authenticity. Don't give up who you are, because who you are is who you are. And if you give that up, then what's left? Really.
Yeah. So we discussed this last week with Dr. Abdullah as well, where he talked about the pressure of society on us, So he talked about his university sort of saying there was only two categories of medics. There was surgeons and there was failed surgeons. And I think a lot of us at med school, we do live through that perception where we think, okay, what does society value the highest as? I have to become that. When it doesn't fit our mold, our personality traits, what we like. And I think you're right. You just have to be authentic. Dr. Abdullah is doing amazing now, and he talks about his journey, how in theatre he just realized one day, nope, I don't want to be in this room anymore. So really, really resonate with that piece of advice about being authentic to who you are.
Yeah,
definitely.
And even one of our I don't think it's private anymore. Excuse me, I'm not going to mention his name anyway, but one of our orthopedic regs just left orthopedic training, and he's quite senior. He's not junior. He's not a junior reg. He's a senior reg.
Yeah.
So because he felt this wasn't for him anymore, and I think, and I remember we had quite a few conversations, and I mean, he was going that down line anyway, but I really supported him. I said, come on, man. I said, don't be worried. I said, just as long as you're doing what's best for you as an individual and for your family, I said, that's the most important thing. I said, everything else will follow. And he's very entrepreneurial. So I'm really, he's coming to our coding course next and stuff like that. So I'm really trying to push him into that area. So I'm saying, come on, be the best of who you can be and enjoy it. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And the one important thing is I think I can look back on all my things that I've done. Like I don't think there's ever been a time that I didn't enjoy what I was doing. And that's really important to me.
No, definitely
amazing.
And I think it's sound advice, and it's nice to hear from someone that is senior, of kind of being comfortable with yourself, comfortable with your day-to-day job, comfortable with what you're doing and the information and stuff you're putting out.
And it's inspiring that it works. The fact that you've gone from GP training to CST to being a microbiology consultant, and it's worked. Being authentic to yourself has worked. That's really inspiring.
I must say that it's not without its challenges at all. I mean, the thing is that people will always try and pigeonhole you into what they think you should be doing. So
Yeah.
this happened to me a lot in my microbiology career, really. Like I said, I'm a passionate quality improvement person, and in fact, I was the BMJ. It's really funny. I'm sure you guys know about it, the NHS Medical Directors Clinical Fellow Scheme that exists.
Yeah.
I was thinking at one time when what year was I in? I was a first year reg, I think, thinking of doing that. And I phoned one of my friends who was one of the execs for the BMJ at the time, because he had done it previously, and I just said to him, I said, come on, dude, what do you think? I'm really interested in this. He goes, oh, Imran, you don't want to do that. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, you don't want to do that. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I trust him, he's a good guy. So I didn't apply for it in the end. And a week later, he phones me and goes, how would you like to come and work at the BMJ? And I was like, oh, yeah, I would love that. That's awesome. So I'd love that. So I did an out-of-program experience. I went and I became the first clinical lead for quality. It was a new department the BMJ had set up. I designed an online platform with them for people to do quality improvement projects, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. Set up a new journal, which is now essentially merged into BMJ Quality Open, which is nice. So I loved it. I loved my time at the BMJ. I really, really loved it. But I think one of the problems is that when you get people who are not within the zone of thinking outside the box, or they've always trained in a situation where it's just the specialty is the most important thing, and you must live and breathe and die in microbiology, that type of thing, which I wasn't of that ilk. I'm not trying to say that I wasn't interested in my specialty. I'm a consultant and now I'm interested now. I looked after patients with it now, so it's not that I wasn't, but I really had a strong penchant for those other things. And I think it was other people just didn't understand this, and they took it personally. Some people took it really personally, that it's they almost took it as an insult, that he's not paying 100% attention to microbiology. Like when I'd set the first part of my FRC path, they didn't expect me to pass. One of the other consultants told me they didn't expect me to pass, so I passed.
Wow.
I passed, and then I think they probably expected me to pass the second part because I was a little bit more senior at the time, and they felt that I wasn't a complete joker. So I managed to pass that too, fortunately. But I mean, it took a lot of hard work, but I did get a lot of abuse for that. And I think this is another thing which is important for people to remember, that it goes back to being authentic. For me, I wasn't about to give up what I found important in life just because other people didn't like it. I was acknowledging what they were saying, and I remember one of my bosses sort of said, Imran, quality improvement is not going to put food on the table. That's what he said to me. And I was just like, thank you for your contribution to my life. Obviously, I didn't say this to him, but this is what I was thinking. And, I sort of ignored him, really. And despite all the headache I got, I mean, at one point, they basically told me that I couldn't use my study leave to attend sort of conferences on quality improvement. I was only allowed to use 5 days. Everything else, I could. I mean, even if I wasted the rest of it, which I did because I never went to anything else, I wasn't allowed to use it. I mean, that's the level that it got to. It was quite toxic in that sense. I mean, I can understand where they came from. I can understand that mentality that they didn't see the bigger picture. It's not a direct criticism of them as people, but I think that they were very, like when like a pack of wolves is being attacked by something. Not that I was attacking anybody, but they felt threatened, and they sort of all sort of congregate and snarl and get a little bit upset. That's what it was, because they just didn't understand, more than anything. And they're good people. I would say that they weren't good people individually. They were, but I think as a group they didn't understand this point very well, and I've been vindicated many times over for my perspective. So, I will say to everybody that if you're going to take a position which you feel is grounded in your own authenticity, just remember that sometimes somebody's not going to like it and they will push back. And your authenticity is the most important thing. I mean, don't give it up. Don't give it up. Don't let people bully you. Don't let people give you a hard time. Stand up for yourself, because if this is what people in the hierarchy think this all the time. We're the trainers, he's the trainee or she's the trainee. We can just say boo and they'll back down. I actually I didn't back down, and I remember I on 2 or 3 occasions I basically went to my training program director and said, if anybody speaks to me or treats me poorly again, you're going to hear about it, and through a much more senior channel. So I ended up having to stand up for myself a lot at that time, But yeah, so that is part and parcel of being authentic, I think, to deal with these problems as well, and just be prepared for that. But it always works out in the end. Well, certainly in my experience, it does.
No, definitely. So we've covered a lot, and I didn't realize we'd get that deep, and there's so much.
Sorry, sorry.
No, it's good. It's really good. There were like moments where you're like, okay, this is amazing. You mentioned about your role as a program director, and you've also held other leadership positions. Tell us what it means to be a leader, and what are kind of the skill sets to be a good leader for other individuals out there.
I think, it's difficult because each leadership role is there and has its own requirements, shall we say. One of the reasons I became the foundation program director was because I wanted to take care of people. I wanted to make sure that people didn't take advantage of them. Not that I hadn't been taken advantage of in my foundation years at all. I didn't feel that at all. But certainly when I was a senior trainee, I felt that people were abusing the medical hierarchy to their own ends, really, or not to their own ends, really, just to stamp authority and to beat their chest and say, I'm the consultant, blah blah blah. And I just thought, this is nonsense. I don't like that type of mentality at all. I believe in something called a flattened hierarchy, and it's something that I've learned my whole time through my quality and safety work in the flattened hierarchy. I mean, I believe in a hierarchy of knowledge. I respect people for their knowledge. If I say to somebody, I want you to stop Tazocin, I don't want them to turn around and say no to me. I'm just like, okay, if you're going to say no, why are you saying no? And if you haven't got a good reason, don't say no, type of thing. I don't mind people discussing with me, but just don't say no off the bat for no good reason. It's not like I'm going to go to a surgeon and say, can I ask for your expert opinion, and just ignore it, which happens to microbiologists all the time. That happens to us all the time. So I believe in a hierarchy of knowledge, but I don't believe in a hierarchy of person per se. So I tell all the junior doctors in my hospital to call me Imran. Not the majority of them are able to, but some of them manage it. And I have a very, very flattened approach to everything in that sense, and I think it really brings out the best in people. My personal feeling is so. I wanted to take on that leadership role for that particular reason. And again, I think it's mired in treating people as equals. I mean, they're not my children. I'm not their dad. And that would be a slightly weird relationship anyway. These people some of them have spouses and children. I mean, I just consider everybody to be equal, if I'm honest, and that may sound slightly alien in our profession, but that really is how I perceive everything. Even when I'm an educational supervisor, so even when I sit down and I fill out people's forms, I said, what is this nonsense, man? Like, oh yeah, David has performed very well. I mean, it's so childish. I'm just like, what is this? I mean, I'm speaking about a colleague, who really, I mean, this is a professional, and I'm talking to them like I'm their teacher or something, like, well done you, for doing this. I mean, I don't like this whole mentality. I think it's very, very overly paternalistic ideas. I mean, there's one thing about competencies and other things, that's fine, but to justify that, oh yeah, he's done really well, he did all his adopts and his CBDs, and is he a good boy? That is just, I mean, that type of thing. So I mean, I try to bring a more flattened approach to get people to think outside the box a little, and to really protect them in some way, to not let people take advantage. So that was really why I came into that leadership position. The other leadership position that I really hold is I'm an associate medical director, really in particular for quality improvement. But that's the focus of that particular role. So that goes without saying. So for me, part of my leadership is making change, authentic change, in a way that other people feel connected to it. I think lots of change happens where people just impose change on other people. Like, I remember when I used to work in A&E, I worked in A&E while I was doing my micro training. I worked for the same period of time, once a week. I used to work in ED. And I remember we had a new matron who came. She's a really nice person, really nice matron, nice lady. But what new people are like? They come in, oh, this is rubbish. We have to change. We have to change. And every week when I come, something else had changed. I was like, where's the fluids? And why can I not find the bionectors? And why can I find, because the matron has changed it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's very good if she thinks it's a problem. But this kind of consultation is useful to engage the stakeholder, to understand what they're thinking. So. I mean, like I said, I come from a very sort of, long line of doing quality improvement, and have been taught by experts in the field. So I know what good quality improvement looks like, and it really is about engaging the whole system in the whole process. So I really want to bring that to my role and make sure that people feel connected to it, not in a top down way, in a way that everybody feels this is a mutual sort of activity. So that's really what I want to bring to that role from a leadership point of view.
I love your ethos in terms of the flattened hierarchy, and I do think that is more encouraging. It encourages certain type of behavior, and it's a positive influence on the culture and workforce. You've had multiple roles, multiple leadership roles: foundation director, honorary professorship, your consultant microbiologist yourself. I'm sure lots of people be curious as to know what your average week looks like. Are you always kind of, because there is a bit of curiosity, like, okay, this guy's doing such amazing stuff, he's doing this and that. Does he actually do any work? Because our impression is a microbiologist, and I tell you it is. They're sitting behind the phone and not doing anything until it rings, and then you get a bollocking. Right? I'm not gonna lie.
But that's because you call them up at 3 a.m. asking them to switch their antibiotics.
So tell us why. So ignoring they're getting the bollocking by a microbiologist, tell us about your average week. What
oh my God. I think my average week is defined as what I call it. This is what I say to my colleagues. I'm running. It's the word I use the most when I'm at work. I literally am running from one thing to the other. Like in a day, I might be taking calls in the morning, but I'm never just taking calls. Okay. I'll be doing something else at the same time. So, or like one of my F1s will say, I need to come and talk to you, So I have a policy that if any of my F1s needs to come and talk to me right now, they're coming right now. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I will stop ward rounds or stop everything if somebody needs to come and talk to me. So that can happen at any given moment as well. Like it did today. Somebody said, I need to come talk to you. I said, fine, come talk, we'll talk. So that happens. Then I may have a ward round. Then I may need to go to ITU. Then I may need to do some authorizing. Then I may have a management meeting. I'm also the OPAC clinical lead, so I do the outpatient antibiotic service. So I have to, so my OPAC nurse and my F1 that I had last time, they'll come and sit down and talk for half an hour about the patients that we have in the service. So I have to somehow just fit it all in somewhere. And it's really funny. I was recently appointed to the Royal College's digital pathology program, which is a really interesting thing. But I remember I was on a phone call with the medical director, and I sort of said, oh yeah, I've just been appointed to this thing, and what we can do is we can get a fellow to come and help with this bit of it. And she just stopped the whole conversation. She goes, did you just take on something else? It's like, oh, I said, I'm in trouble now. I said, and she goes, we're going to talk, aren't we? And I was like, okay. So I went to her office, and I must say, and I must give a shout out to Nena Rasuji, who's our medical director, consultant hematologist, and she is one of the most remarkable women I've ever worked with in healthcare. I mean, if anybody has a chance to work with her, please do. I mean, I nominated her for sort of Businesswoman of the Year award. She is just phenomenal. Anyway, I went and sat down with her, and she goes, tell me what you're doing. And I said, well, I'm doing a few things. And she started listing everything that I'm doing. She knows better than me what I'm doing. So she said, you're doing this, 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 this. And she goes, where is the time? And I was like, come on, man. I said, she's got 4 kids, and bless her, she's a single mother, and she's the medical director, and she holds all different positions in Southwest London. And I was like, this is like the pot calling the kettle black. You were saying this to me. I said, you're not much, but it's frantic. I must say that I'm just, even when I come home from work, whether it's, clinical entrepreneur program, Code Med, whatever. So I'm still writing my own software, whatever I'm doing, I'm still always doing something. I usually go to sleep at about 1:30 every day. That's really what my day is like.
I want to mention, and it's a key point, and it's, despite you doing 101 things, always running around, do you still enjoy it? Are you still happy in what you're doing? Because sometimes you get caught up in it all, and you can't reflect and be like, do you know what? Take a step back. I really love what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I do love what I do. I do love the roles I have, but what I will say is that when I'm not able to do them the way that I would like to, that causes me anxiety. Let's just put it that way. So, I manage all the clinical bits like I'm supposed to, but there's a bit beyond the clinical bit, which is the strategy. So as the lead for antimicrobial stewardship in my trust, there's certain things that I have to look for in the future, which I don't get to do that as much as I used to when I didn't have so many roles. So it's not that I don't enjoy it. I still love my job. I still think it's great, but sometimes I worry about how well I'm performing at it in terms of the holistic sense. So that does bother me sometimes. Yeah, it does. Yeah. But I wouldn't give any of it up.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of knew. I kind of knew. It's like you do it, but you'll never give anything up.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time,
Yep.
and now we kept you busy. The last thing, and you touched upon it, in addition to all the things you're doing, this is the new thing that kind of flagged up on my radar was CodeMed,
Yep.
NHS Clinical Entrepreneurship.
Yep.
You're a co-founder. There's this trend towards clinicians becoming coders or software engineers, or at least having a better understanding of the tech world.
Yep.
You're poised in a very advantageous position. Tell us about CodeMed, why you founded it, and what's your vision for it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I mean, I think basically it sort of started quite by accident. In my annual appraisal, one of the ED consultants who's my appraiser, he sort of, I mean, obviously not all consultants know each other very well, and especially the ED consultants because they live a bit separately to the rest of us. But he sort of said, "Wow, you do all this coding and tech stuff," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I do," And he goes, "Why have you ever considered teaching it?" And this was back in 2017. He said this to me, and I was like, I never thought about it, but now that you mention it, it's not a bad idea actually. So what I did was after that, I basically started offering coding lessons for free in my trust. I would teach once a week. I advertised it to everybody, and I usually get between 15 and 20 people wanting to do it, and about 5 people remaining after week 5 or 6. Because it's quite heavy. So. My first cohort, two of my first students were Aaron and Joe, who you've probably seen them on Twitter.
They're the co-founders of.
They're co-founders of CodeMed,
if I'm
exactly.
correct.
So I basically taught them coding right at the beginning, and they have by far been the 2 best students, by far, like no comparison. I mean, now there's some actually in this current cohort, there's actually some very good ones, but they really took to it quite naturally, and started developing their own software afterwards. I mean, they were always engaged. It's not like they sort of came to the lesson and didn't do any work and didn't bother practicing. They were really quite well engaged. And, after about a year or 2, they were producing their own software. I mean, Aaron, both of them, I mean, Joe's produced
amazing.
the ILS software and Aaron's gone on to Sim EPRs, accelerators, Department of Health. I mean, as an F3, he's done masses.
I saw his credentials and I was like, are you sure we're in the same stage of training?
I mean, Aaron is. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty hard going, but Aaron just blows me out the water, and so does Joe. But Joe, like me, tries to take a more holistic approach. Aaron's just like full throttle, like I'm going to do it. So basically, I think it was last year or maybe at the beginning of this year, I sort of started getting more requests from other people to do this. And I thought, well, now that we're moving to completely online, because I used to do these face-to-face, I said, why don't we just open it up to other people? Now, the thing was that one of the things I found is that lots of people, because I've always taught this for free, people tend not to take it seriously. There are 1 or 2 people who take it very seriously, but lots of people don't. They're like, oh yeah, Imran, I can't come this week, or I didn't do my homework, or stuff like that. And you just think, come on, man, you're wasting your own time, and actually you're wasting mine as well, because I mean, whilst it doesn't necessarily affect me in that sense, because I'm still teaching people, but you're still taking my time and for free, and and you're not doing anything with it. At least do something with it. So then what I did was I said, because I realized that teaching lots of people was going to be difficult for me. So I said to Aaron and Joe, why don't we do this together? And to be fair, they'd been teaching with me for free from previous cohorts. So I said, why don't we turn this into something bigger? And we'd always sort of loosely called our group CodeMed. I just called it CodeMed. It was just.
I like the name.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the name is so then we formalized it into a company, and we. We basically offered it as a paid course now, and it has been enlightening to see what's happened when people pay. The level of interest changes dramatically. Everybody attends. I mean, other than when they're on call, everybody attends. They do all their homework. They ask extra questions. Sometimes we have one-to-one sessions outside of the class which we offer. So it's really it's really nice to have people who are so engaged and really wanting to produce things. So we thought this is great. So.
And I think it's probably enjoyable for you guys as well. Just see people a bit more engaged.
Yeah.
Like the intention is to learn, and they invested into heavily. Because I'm sure you're a teacher, and the last and worst thing you want to see is people not engaging, or they're not kind of taking the material.
Yeah. I mean, I must say we get it's so weird, it's so geeky here, but the 3 of us get so excited when one of our we're all mentors to every person, but we have groups of our own. So if one of our people in our group, they send us like a picture of what they've done or their code. We message it to each other rather geekily and say, "Isn't this awesome? Isn't this awesome?" And we sort of geek out on the fact that other people look at. But it's so nice to see other people sort of developing their own stuff and
We're gonna have to
taking
join.
it forward.
Yeah.
So it's been
Yeah.
really good. So largely, there's that part of it, which is that part of CodeMed. But the other part of it is obviously that we write our own software. So I'm writing 2 or 3 pieces at the moment. Aaron's still finishing CMPR, and Joe's helping me with another piece. So we're still producing our own stuff as well, which is important. And that's really where the NHS clinical entrepreneur bit fits in, because we really, I mean, CodeMed is not our NHS clinical entrepreneur thing. Yeah, that's not really the NHS clinical entrepreneur thing. That's Aaron applied with CMEPR and I applied with another idea, which is morphing and changing as we speak. So we'll see what I end up
As is
with.
the nature of these things.
With the nature of things, I haven't quite decided exactly what I'm going to do. So, but it's been really interesting seeing it. So, I think the future for CodeMed and what we want to do is we want to really produce a platform which allows people to take full advantage of the possibilities of coding and to realize that part of it. And obviously we start off with teaching people Java, and the reason that we do that is firstly it's the language that we know the best and it's the one that we're most comfortable with. I mean, we could easily teach them something like Python or something else, but the point is that you teach everybody the principles of coding, because largely these languages are all the same and they're not that much different in terms of just the syntax changes, but the actual mechanisms are the same. So largely that's one sort of pillar of it. The other one is producing our own software, but the third pillar, which is we're setting up something called the CodeMed Academy, is taking our delegates forward, and this will all be for free. What we want to do is we want to take people's ideas and get them to the next level with their ideas. So almost like the clinical entrepreneur scheme, but not quite in the same league. Obviously, I don't have Tony's contacts, but in that sense. But we want to help people because we know we've been there. We've produced software ourselves, so we know some of the pitfalls and stuff, and stuff actually that we're learning on the clinical entrepreneur scheme. We can bring some of that and help people as well. So we really want to engage people and get tech as a substance moving in a way that it probably hasn't before. And I think that what we offer in some ways. I mean, there's lots of people out there. So I know you've had Josh, and Josh is such an amazing guy. I mean, he's a one man army. That guy is, and I've is literally a one man army, and he's awesome, and we even though we've had one video call, but we obviously talk on Twitter a lot, but I think what we want to do is, and somebody highlighted on Twitter really well today, somebody from America, he sort of said to Josh, that one thing I find quite difficult is sort of trying to figure out how to start and what resources to use and what to do. And what we've done is we've compiled that into a really neat course for 12 weeks where we give you all the resources. You have one-to-one mentoring all the time. We give you infographics. Everything's medically based. So we're really trying to sort of bring that all together.
I think what you're doing is great. I think, and the beauty of it is clinician-centered, clinician design by clinicians. So, I'm not going to lie. I did a 4-hour video in Python. I watched 20 minutes. I wrote hello, and then I closed the application. I thought, you know what? My skill set and I was a bit offensive. I'll take the same from you. So, but it's lovely to see. And the difficulty has always been, I want to do something, but I don't know how to do it, how to get started. When I see stuff like CodeMed, and then I'm like, okay, maybe finally we have people out there trying to kind of solve this pain point. And I know it's going to be an immense success. And I can just see your kids coming in, so I'm gonna try to wrap it up. But it's been a massive pleasure.
No, thank you.
If there is any advice you can give, you're senior to us. You've kind of gone through different phases of training. You're a co-founder. What advice would you give? If it's anything, it can be anything in the world.
I mean, I think there's a few things. One, obviously, is be authentic. The other thing is something that Stella said to me once, which people will argue with this point, but I find it really valuable. She said, when a good opportunity comes your way, grab it. Think about how to solve it later, like the logistics of it. And I live by that. Anytime that somebody says to me, are you interested? I was like, yep. And then I'll figure out how I'm going to manage it afterwards, which sort of ends up potentially putting you into a little bit of trouble as well. I'm not going to say that it doesn't, and I'm not going to lie that it's always easy. But unless you go for those opportunities that come your way and try to create them actively, then you're never going to achieve the type of momentum that you want for yourself if you're entrepreneurial. If you're not entrepreneurial, that's a little bit different. But if you're entrepreneurial, if somebody says, I know lots of people, if you say to them, why don't you do this? And say, I'm a little bit busy and stuff like this, make yourself unbusy. If it's a good opportunity, go for it. If you're entrepreneurial, if that's your thing. So be authentic, take every opportunity that you can. And I think my last piece of advice is just be kind to everybody. Everybody has their own difficulties, their own life. Don't assume to know where anybody else is. Just treat everybody with kindness and respect, and I think that everything else follows after that.
No, definitely. I really, really loved this episode. It turned out greater than I thought it would be. I knew it would be great, but it turned into epic.
Thank you. Thank you. But you are such, you made it so easy and such to ask great open questions that actually you can see that you guys are professionals at this. And I said, I've listened to some of your episodes and I was like, I'm ready for this. So.
No, we do love meeting people, and I think we're great, but it's putting us in a position where we can meet a lot of people across healthcare and kind of other industries. And we really do learn a lot.
We learn a lot, From these conversations, we take away so much more than people think.
So, we'll definitely kind of put all the description and people have to get started. I think the first cohort has already started, right? So they'll probably have to catch the next cohort.
Yeah, that's on the 26th of May. We start the next one. So, yeah.
Okay, fine. Right. You might end up seeing us there.
Please. Please do. It'd be great to see you guys there. Yeah.
Thank you, Imran, once again for coming and taking the time out. And thank you to our listeners as well.
A pleasure.
We'll see you all next week.
Thank you both.